maybe in the Middle East, we're in such a place that we are so much blessed by having abundant resources of energy that we may not feel the pinch as much as the people in the West, where you realize before you buy a car, you really gotta check what's the mileage that you can acquire out of your car before you buy it out. How many miles or kilometers per hour this car will run me, and that reflects the commercial value you want to pay for it. Okay, how much your gas is going to cost you if you have to use the cooking gas, and everybody is looking into the benchmarking. Unlike the standards of living we have in the Gulf here, it's really high enough that sometimes we don't bother about it. Okay, but that is where you save the energy. Today, if we talk about most of the G7 or G20 major agendas on the topics on the agenda, we see that the energy prices and cost of energy, employment, and global warming. If you see any agenda of all these big conferences, you see that those three elements are on their main agenda. And we should reckon with all those sort of resources and how we better save it. So if we talk about aluminum in particular, you can visualize if you get a piece of aluminum produced out of the virgin ore of alumina, bauxite, refined into alumina, it will cost, assuming, $100 per ton. Okay, now to come to practical terms, it's above $1,300 cost of production. But just for a unit's sake, you can recycle that ton of metal for only 5% of that energy, and you're saving 95% of the energy. If you see the copper will save you 85%, lead will save you 65% of recycling lead versus virgin ore of lead. And if you recycle steel, you save 74% of that energy. So for all what it takes, that saving of energy is something you cannot just ignore, because it's not only saving you energy, it's also saving you in terms of environmental gas emissions, which is becoming one of the major problems worldwide today, is how the global warming can be contained. And all the industrialized cities keep talking about it, and either they know that recycling could really save a lot of gas emissions, or they ignore it and they like to continue with their own agendas for any bureaucratic or maybe different agendas, political or otherwise. So we see that, for example, what is recycled in aluminum, or in general, we see 8.5 million tons of aluminum is recycled yearly. And what it amounts to in terms of our day-to-day understanding and layman's terms, it can really get off the road 4.8 million cars. In what sense? If you have cars emitting gas, carbon dioxide on the road, and you have recycled that much aluminum per year, it's as if you have gotten those cars off the road and you've saved the environment worth of that carbon dioxide emissions. If you talk about different terminology, that could really run an energy for 1.4 million homes each year. Okay, and that is quite a number that cannot be ignored. If we save that much energy to run those houses, it's got to be something really serious. It also saves 41 million trees within that much recycled tonnage. And in simple words, I can tell you, if you recycle 1 ton of paper, OEC, corrugated carbon, carton today, which is less than the size of those 2 sofas out here, that is a weight of 1 ton. It's equivalent to having to knock off the woods 14 to 16 oak trees. So you can imagine, if I recycle that 1 ton of paper and carton, I save those 16 trees out there in the woods. That is magnificent. We cannot just imagine what more we can benefit out of it. If we talk about natural resources, you've got water, you've got greens, you've got natural resources above ground and natural resources under the ground. all the mines having the metals under the ground should be preserved for future generations. If we run out of some of the raw materials, where we are obliged to go and dig a hole in the ground to look for other sources, we can easily at that time go for mining. However, all the metals above the ground, I call it the urban mine, which everybody can have an easy access to it, and it can run the industry with all these amenities and advantages as well. Landfills, I mean, you see that ugly picture out here. If you see everything has been laid out on the road and there was no paper recycling, no plastic recycling, how would our backyard look like, or how would the streets look like? It would look like a jungle. So we gotta protect the environment. And I will not talk much in details because I have 7 minutes long video clip by the end of it. And I hope that you all will enjoy it at the end to exactly see where I'm coming from. Jobs, creating jobs. I mean, one of the major indices in the States which can make a lot of difference, or in the West or in general, how much is the unemployment rate. If you see the unemployment rate has improved by a fraction of a point, that is a positive sign. It can make the stock market going up, or it can really change. So here if you see what our business in recycling can give in terms of jobs, you get a 1.5 million jobs available in this industry can be created if we do the right recycling. It's an international business. It has a lot of capital intensive involvement. It's got insatiable demand for money circulation. The minute you have raw material, okay, you can easily find a buyer. It's a question of price. Now, if we talk about aluminum recycling in more details, I would say this, that aluminum has different applications, and if we come to the packaging industry, it takes about 26.2% for the packaging industry, followed by transportation, and I'll tell you in the following slides how that is transformed into transportation and automobile industry fabrications out of aluminum. Building and constructions, you see all the aluminum cladding, extrusions, and so forth. Now the technology has changed from in some areas where it's exposed to atmospheric humidity and atmospheric climate changes. The aluminum is done as great with the same look and the same luxury of wood. And we see a lot of export containers go out of aluminum, not out of steel, for the lightweight, then electrical appliances, and the durable consumable items, as well as engineering and so forth. That is the more of the utilization. So we see here the packaging industry. It's so important. You can't take a parcel or take away food without a sealed aluminum package. Otherwise, you would not even think of putting it in the car. Now you see this Range Rover bodies nowadays. It is 100% the body and the parts are of aluminum, except the chassis and some of those which do need to be of iron. The wheel rim is already aluminum, the engine block, the engine head, the piston, etc. Now the body by itself and the components are of aluminum, and that is an aluminum which has got a great resistance, got a shock absorbing safety as much as iron, and it has bypassed the iron features in terms of shock absorbing, and it's been studied according to the science. What it does, in fact, it lightens the aluminum body by half a ton. The old Range Rover used to weigh about 2.6 tons. Now the new Range Rovers are weighing about 2.0, so you got 600 kilos off the road. And what does that mean? You consume less energy, you emit less carbon oxides, and you got a better mileage for your tank. Cladding of aluminum, extrusions, etc. In the construction, we see here most of the high-risings getting aluminum cladding because it's lighter for the weight structure and durable for the humidity. Now, coiled sheet is a big business as well. How's my time slot?
You're fine, you're fine.
We good? Okay.
Yes.
So we realized that the recycling of aluminum does close the loop. In what sense? I can tell you one thing. We, as we'll show you in some of the slides coming up, we recycle aluminum in one of our plants out here in UAE. It's one of the aluminum recycling plants we have, and I'll demonstrate that throughout the session here. We get the parts which are discarded and they're spared out. We take them into our recycling facility, we remelt them and make ingots out of it, and it goes to Japan, Toyota, Mitsubishi, where they can die cast it into a part that falls back into your showroom or your car dealer. If in case one of your parts go down, they replace it with the same piece of what you've discarded. Gotta put that off, sorry. Excuse my music. Now, at least I'm in an Arab country, so people can understand. Last time I was in Europe, and I was on the podium, and I couldn't see how easily to turn that off. I literally had to put it under my hip and keep on pushing. So we close the loop, as we will demonstrate shortly. Sustainable economy will be demonstrated, sustainable society, and you realize that the environment, again, is well taken care of, and the future is there to keep doing it. Now, there is a word which a lot of people hear nowadays, and they look down on it, the word scrap. A lot of you have heard the word scrap, and I'll tell you one story. I was going to a bank's lunch, one of those big name banks, and I always wear a tie when I go. I look okay, decent maybe. So he exchanged cards with me on the lunch table, and everybody had a different industry. So I gave him my card. At that time, our company's name was Sharif Scrap Trading Company, because that's the only name I could get out of the Sharjah economics department. So Matfa would know about it. They said, only scrap is available. You cannot talk about recycling. You cannot talk about metals. Do you do gold or silver? I said, no. They said, then metals is out. What is recycling? Scrap is what you get. I said, fine, I'm okay. I give the card to the guy after he gave me his card, and he goes, oh, scrap. But you look okay. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, this is the time I realized how low people look at people who do recycling. However, on the other hand, we have time, right?
Yes.
Okay, please give me a hand. There is a guy who does recycling in a very individual layman's terms. He put his overhaul, and that's what he does for a living. He goes out into buildings, and he collects all the spared households, discarded kitchenwares, whatever you call it. And he has a bag on his back, and he's so filthy looking. His hands are dirty with gloves, but he is illiterate. He goes into one of those flats on one of the floors, and he knocks in the morning, and he says, do you have scrap? And the guy says, apparently he's a doctor wearing a long dress, and he says, no, we don't have scrap. Why would you knock on my door? He said, I'm sorry, if you don't have scrap, okay, I'm sorry to offend you. Now, what do you do for a living? He's asking the doctor. He didn't realize he was a doctor. He says, well, can't you see I'm a doctor? Okay, and why uniform shows that? He says, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with getting a job like that. And he picks up the bag and carries on down the stairs, thinking so proud of his business that he's doing. Back to scrap. What scrap means in our terms is a sustained characteristics during remelting, leading to reduction of atmospheric CO2 and protection of the environment. That is my terminology. I put the abbreviations, and I made some recycling sense out of it. If you look into each word, it makes a lot of sense. So, quickly about the canned recycling. Now, Ms. Habiba will think, oh, that's my business, canned recycling. I'll run you through this right where the mines come out with the bauxite, and it takes you to a refining business where it goes into a smelter afterwards to make the billets, and there into the casting of ingots, and then fabrication shops for the extrusions, and therein for the taking this into the can manufacturing, and it takes it into the Emirates cans. That's what it does. Get the coils, and they punch them out and fill them up, and that's your soda pop. So take it to a beverage can, and then as it's being discarded after it is being consumed by the day-to-day, it goes back into a recycler where it gets sorted out, shredded, and back into the remelting. What it did here, it basically has bypassed the first three most expensive stages of bringing the aluminum metals out of the ground. And that makes a cycle of its own. We can demonstrate that in the next slide out here, where you can see how it closes the loop. This is another diagram where it shows here. I don't have a pointer, but you can always see here. You start with the can plant, goes to a consumer. It gets either into a landfill, where Dubai or Sharjah municipality have to go and get the recycling campaign like BIA is doing, which is the hard way of getting it done, because it's going to be, I would say, contaminated with a lot of organic waste, non-metallics, and so forth and so on. And it's almost impossible to deal with it. Or it goes to a can recycler like ourselves, where we can make ingots out of it and take it to the producer again. So that is the entire cycle where it can really close the... go to the slide out here. It says, normal life is cradle to grave, which is in Arabic, من المهدي إلى اللحد. Whereas aluminum can take you from cradle to cradle, because it does not go to an end. It does keep recycling itself. And before I come into this, just to share with you what do we do in terms of Sharif Group in recycling, just few slides and we'll get into the other. Sound is... Okay, now Sharif Metals basically is a family-owned business. I mentioned that late grandfather I started the business in 1930 in Naples, Palestine. My late dad also has taken up the business, and we brothers have taken up that from young age into our day-to-day spring breaks and summer holidays, where we spend the holidays in that scrap yard. We learned what the business is, and this is where we got our pocket money. And this is why we took care of the business quite well. Now, our core business is really how recycling can take us into a different platform. We specialize in recycling. We focused on our resources. We have done backward and forward integration, and we have taken it into a different platform. So the old dad recycler turned out with a generation of having, I would proudly say that I was having a very unprecedented post on the World Recycling Federation as a board member, then as a vice president, then as a chairman for one of the committees, and now as an ambassador, still running the show. Earlier they thought Middle East is really substandard kind of businesses, and all the people out there, they may not talk our language. So what Sharif Metals have done is put recycling on the world recycling map, and it is a fact. Last 2009, we brought 1,500 delegates out of the World Recycling Federation from 65 countries into Dubai Grand Hyatt, and they were quite impressed with what they've seen here. We have different yard locations. I'll run through this quite quick within the Gulf, and we've taken it up to also where we have the non-ferrous, we have the ferrous, and we have the total 600,000 tons of annual recycled metals. We're proud to see that this is the business that is resembling and perhaps outpacing some of the businesses out in Europe and in the West in terms of sophistication, knowledge, and development. This is a bird's-eye view for one of the Sharjah plant. As a matter of fact, you see a lot of cranes and recycling equipments where we have combined the technology with the Oriental man operation, where we do need a combination of both. I mean, where we can perhaps produce a better product than others in the West, they have sophisticated machines but less manpower involvement. We have a combination of both, which gives the quality quite a different style. This is one of our facilities out there. We have a new plant coming up in Saj'a, in Sharjah, and we have a few others coming out also within the Gulf. So in aluminum, just to run you through, this is the can, which you see the mountains of cans are not really on the road. They're not really somewhere discarded in the landfilling. They're collected dearly, can by can, and bag to bag. And Ms. Habiba Marashi has also been cooperating with us, and we've been cooperating with her likewise with an annual can collection campaign. They land into our backyard facilities, and we're happy to continue this kind of association and cooperation for long years to come. Here, of course, some of the photos of how the bio stocks gets loaded and how it gets processed and so forth. Aluminum extrusions, again, take it to billets and all the extrusions which are out of the dismantled buildings if they're old enough, or out of the production line where they come in back into the recycling chain quite quickly. Auto parts of automotives, here you see what I was talking about. You get the spare part recycled where you make aluminum or different, now I'm talking about different products here. You see the picture in the middle out here. A lot of the car dealers, you see a lot of them in the UAE and in Sharjah particularly, they import most of the cars which can't run on the road in Japan more than 5 years. They bring them out here. They sell the serviceable parts which can go to people who save money, putting an engine block in their own car, or maybe goes down to Africa or some other countries where they can't afford brand new cars. Now, whatever is surplus to their own sales, we take it for recycling. And what we do with it, we make ingots out of it, which is as per the flow of what we see here. It goes into our furnaces up to a certain temperature, certain recipe, processes, controls, and ingots which go up to the international specifications of ASTM. All the testing and engineering tests are done so it fits back in your car with no flaw. And that is approved by Japanese and American and German technology car dealers as well. So we have different, for the steel business, we have Diox, which removes the oxygen out, and that's where we make the small cubes. So a lot of applications are there, and as you see, I will not bore you with much of it. However, BIR is a name not a lot of you know, where I'm proudly saying I'm an ambassador of. It was founded in 1948. Now it has about 950 members out of 70 countries worldwide, including some government federations. Okay, and what it does, it holds 2 conventions in a year. It gathers about 1,500 people under one roof, and they have a lot of networking. They talk about their businesses. It has metals, it has textiles, rubber, plastic, and what else? Paper. So for all of you who need to know what more BIR is doing, I'll be happy to share some cards with you after this session. BMR is Bureau of Middle East Recycling. It was founded in 2009, past the crisis of financial crisis, and where we have seen a lot of chows and difficulties in running the day-to-day business. We thought, why don't we just have a platform for the Middle East companies who do recycling? I took a chair of this after being elected for 2 sessions in a row, and I'm proudly saying that we have so far 150 members. We were also privileged to have Ms. Habiba Marashi in our last general meeting. She had also a report and a presentation, which was very good value addition as well. So let's give a round of applause for Ms. Habiba Marashi for all the good work. Now, I won't bore you with a lot of talks. We have quick facts about aluminum recycling in simple man terms. If we see that important piece of metal, what it does, basically, it's a consumer product. And what it does in day-to-day life, it has the characteristics and the chemical compositions which can be recycled indefinitely. And one can recycling can save for 100 bulbs, 100 light bulb, it can light it up for 4 hours. What I'm saying is, recycling one can save you the energy that can, by that you saved energy, it can light up a light bulb for 4 hours, or it can run your TV for 3 hours. And that is not so insignificant. When we see that more than, I would say, 1.5 billion population, and even more, if we only talk about India and China, who live out there in the rural areas, they don't have electricity supply. They sleep on candle lights, and it's not very romantic, I assure you. They do it for the survival. So another piece of can, okay, it can come back on the shelf in 60 days. This piece of can you have maybe put in that garbage bin. It gets collected back into a recycler, processed out, back in coil, maybe to Emirates cans or others. You'll see it on the shelf in 60 days. Whereas if you had to go for mining, okay, you'll talk about 2 years or even longer. 1 ton of aluminum reduces 12 tons of carbon dioxide emissions, so that is really a lot of figures that needs to be taken in consideration. Now, if you talk about 54 billion cans, and someone say, what is the 54 billion cans got to do with my lecture? America recycles 54 billion cans a year, for your info. And what it does amount to, it can save 15 million barrels of crude oil. Okay, and also more of that in terms of energy saving, pollution control, and carbon emission reduction. And when we talk about the 80 billion, now I said 64 billions, now there's another slide where it says 80 billion cans of aluminum is produced every year, and where if it had been saved for the electricity or energy, it would light up a city like Denver, Colorado for 10 years non-stop. Isn't that amazing? Now, they recycle 2/3 of their aluminum cans because perhaps for the sake of collection campaign, etc. And you know, this is something interesting to try to figure out maybe when you go home. If you, the United States recycles in 2 weeks cans, which if you stack them up hypothetically, using your imagination, they could reach from the Earth to the moon in terms of distance. So who is good in math can figure it out, and we'll talk about what prize we give him tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't make it very long in terms of lecturing. However, it's a pride and pleasure for me to share those info, some of what I have in my reservoir. I know the time is limited, but if I want to conclude, I'll say we gotta look for the future, and if we do look for the future, we have to recycle. And if you watch this few minutes video clip, I'm sure you'll appreciate it, but if I get away with a glass of water in the meantime, I would really appreciate it. Technical support.